Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Teach Your Guitar to Sing. And tonight we're going to be working on some finger picking. I haven't worked finger picking into these episodes so far, partly because strumming is something pretty much everybody is familiar with and does, and finger picking some people do and some people don't. So what I'd like to do tonight is do a very brief run over of some finger picking patterns that if you're unfamiliar with them, you will need to practice them by themselves. And then we're going to use those to, kind of dress up Don't Think Twice, It's All Right, which is a great song. And the things that we do to dress it up will apply whether you are finger picking or strumming. So I will actually be going back and forth between both of those as we get into the song. And as I said, the finger picking is something that takes a certain amount of just repetitive, diligent practice to get it so that your fingers move automatically. And it's not actually terribly difficult once you see how it's laid out. And we're also going to look at, for those who already finger pick, we'll look at some of the ways of modifying the finger picking so you can get some different effects and sounds in the course of playing the song. So it'll be sort of a two-part lesson because I'll be going over the finger picking for a little while, and then we'll be diving into the song with finger picking and strumming and doing some alternating back and forth. So if you're already skilled at finger picking, hang in there. I think you'll still learn a couple of things that'll help you organize what you're doing with your finger picking, and then we will use those to teach your guitar to sing while finger picking. And as always, the idea of these lessons is not just to teach you a song and how to play a song and show you the tricks for a song. We're using the tricks and the techniques that we use in a particular song as examples of general things that you could do in any song. So that's always our thrust. And I try to pick songs that are good vehicles for putting a lot of different things in. And this song in particular, I think, is another song that really can stand a lot of scene changes and a lot of mood changes and a lot of texture changes as you move from verse to verse to verse. It really helps magnify the emotional content of the song. So we'll be talking about that, and away we'll go here. So the first thing we'll look at is if you look up on the upper right part of the screen, you'll see that I've written out a series of finger picking patterns. They may not be recognizable to you yet as finger picking patterns, but basically I've got 6 kind of thin black lines. I'm sorry they're not quite as dark as against this background as they were when I put them together in Photoshop. But basically there's 6 lines for guitar strings, and then there are T's and 2's and 1's, which means thumb and first finger and second finger. And we're going to use different orders of first and second and thumb to create rhythms. And I'll show you one thing to begin with. Just if you put your fingers, 2 fingers, your third and fourth, on the top, right near the edge of the sound hole, just below the first string, and let them lightly rest there. That gives you a fixed reference. Some people finger pick without that. Many people do a light rest there, and I find that makes it much easier to get the precision of where your fingers are that you need. And you can always lift that if you need to move around more rapidly. So the basic setup is that if you sort of hold your fingers on the strings, not with your thumb rotated so it's behind your fingers as you look down at them. See, now I'm saying my thumb, and then over here is my finger in line, and then my thumb is now behind my finger. Get your thumb at least even with your fingers, or maybe even a little head, like you're starting to go into a hitchhiking form here. Now, not too much, but it's just rotating the wrist so your thumb is either behind the fingers or it's slightly in front of the fingers. And that's to give clearance, so when your fingers move, they're not colliding with your thumb, and when your thumb moves, it's not colliding with your fingers. Your thumb could rest on the 6th string, and you could put your first finger against the first string and your second finger against the second string. What could be more logical, right? Okay, and with that little turn to the wrist, that's the basic areas of interest for those 3 fingers. 6th string, first string, second string. Now there will be times when we move the thumb to the 5th string and we keep first and second finger on first and second string. There'll also be times when we do the thumb wherever it might be, and we move the first and second finger over to the 2nd string and the 3rd string. So we've got sort of this outside in kind of arrangement, or we move a little more to the inside with the fingers on these two strings, and we'll see as we look at a couple patterns. Again, I'm going to go through these patterns really quickly. I'm going to show you how they work and how you can read them, and then you can review the video and work on them by yourself in order to get that together. So I'm going to show you the patterns and then treat this as though we already know all the patterns. Okay, so the most basic pattern that you need to know, if you only know this and then modify a little, you can go anywhere pretty much with finger picking in a 4-beat per measure song. And I call it a continuous pattern, and it's basically alternating thumb, finger, and that's it. And it just does that over and over again. So if you look up at the first, here's the thumb on the 6th string, second finger plays the 1st string, thumb plays the 3rd string, reaches all the way over, and first finger plays the 2nd string. That's the whole pattern, and then it just repeats from there. Pardon me for a second. So you've got, I'm going to finger a G chord. I'm capoed at the 2nd fret. Excuse me. Thumb 2, thumb 1. Now, if you didn't anchor your hand, you'd be going. You'll be almost unavoidable to use your arm to do the plucking with, and that means that your hand moves away from the strings instead of staying near them. So if you keep your fingers lightly anchored, you're forced to use the strength and movement of your fingers to do the plucking rather than jumping up and down with your arm, and I think that's a huge advantage. Now the rhythm for that is 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and. So in this first group here, there's a very little thin blue line there, so that's delineating this first pattern in a 4-beat pattern: thumb 2, thumb 1, thumb 2, thumb 1. And that's it. So you could just sit and practice that. And of course, you can do it as slow as you need to keep track of what you're doing. 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and don't be alarmed if that feels awkward at first. It will, I almost guarantee it, unless you've done a little finger picking before. But it smooths out pretty soon. Give it 10 minutes, give it 15 minutes. You know, do that a couple times, you know, over the course of a week, and you'll find it starts to fall together as something you can just call up and have it do. Now, what makes finger picking really interesting is that I said the thumb would be handling the 6th string, the 1st and 2nd fingers handling 1st and 2nd string, and we saw now the thumb reached over to the 3rd string. The thumb's area of interest, the thumb's zone, is either 6th string, 5th string, 4th string, or 3rd string. 1, 2, 3, 4. And on a steel string guitar, those happen to be the wound strings. So the thumb handles the bass, and the 2nd finger and 1st finger handle the 1st and 2nd strings, except if we move this pattern over a little so that the 2nd string's on the 1st string, the 2nd finger's on the 1st string, and the 1st finger is on the 3rd string. And if you look at the next group here, I've got the 2nd finger playing the 2nd string, 1st finger playing the 3rd string, thumb is playing 6th string, and thumb is playing 4th string. And that would be the same exact pattern, but just closed your fingers in a little bit, and the thumb still moves over to the next string over from the 1st finger. So the pattern is still thumb 2, thumb 1, thumb 2, thumb 1, thumb 2, thumb 1, except I've moved from these strings to these strings. And the thumb, instead of doing 3rd string in the middle of it, is doing the 4th string in the middle of it. Now it's very useful to be able to simply shift the string grouping that you're using as you go to different chords, because it lets you pull out different parts of the chord. You also can, instead of starting with the thumb on the 6th string, you could start with the thumb on the 5th string. If you were fingering a C chord, you might especially prefer to do that because that gives you the C note as the root. And you could still move over to the second string. And in this second group here, I've done one other thing, actually two other things I want to show you. Where here the thumb just went, sixth string, third string, sixth string, third string. Here I'm going sixth string, fourth string, fifth string, fourth string. That's making the thumb hop from here to here on the 1 beat and on the 3 beat. And it makes it go boom da 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 boom da 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 boom da 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 boom da da boom da 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 boom da 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 boom da 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 boom da da da, and gives you an alternating bass sound. So that's the first variation on the basic pattern that we're doing, other than moving it over on the strings. So instead of going, let's say I'm fingering an E minor chord. Okay, so I'm doing the very first group right here, and I'm going to do that a couple times, and then I'm going to switch to this where I'm doing the second string pattern, but I'm also going to alternate where the thumb is on the sixth string and the fifth string. Again, do this first group, get that down, and then start looking at where you put your thumb as a variation, but that's what that second group is there. So if I'm going, so I'm sixth string, first string, second string, third string, or sixth string, second string, now, could I do that alternating bass thing if I started from the sixth string? Absolutely. If I also did the first string position. And now you start to get the thing that really is magic about fingerpicking is you've got these cascading notes tumbling over each other. They all still ring when you're holding the chord. Bottom line is you could play any one of the 4 thumb strings at any time in the pattern. So all of a sudden you've got a whole bunch of different sort of little orchestrations you could do within a chord. And I'm not going to go much more into that. There's one other thing with this pattern here. Notice that I didn't do the and after 4. If you might not have noticed that while you were looking at the pattern, but I left that and off deliberately because one of the variations you can do with this, if you're going 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, you notice there's no break in the pattern. It's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. If you leave that last and off, it makes it feel like a pattern that stops and starts again. You can actually hear the pattern a little more when it's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. What was the 1 beat? Where did it start? It's just kind of, it just goes. And that's a great continuous background. That's why I call that a continuous pattern. And the only thing that changes is what bass notes you're hitting and what chord you're playing. But if I do that, if I leave that last and off, you see they come in little packages in, like little quanta of fingerpicking. And it's also, it may be very useful to use that last and most of the way through. And don't do it when you're about to do a chord change. Just before the chord change, so you have a full beat to change the chord instead of just a half beat to change the chord. So that's the continuous pattern. And you can review this to get, to refresh yourself on any of the things that I said about it. The next pattern is what I call a discontinuous pattern, and it's a little faint against this background. I'm going to put my hand behind it. Now you can see there's a straight line, a yellow line between that thumb on the 1 beat and a 2 that also seems to be lined up right on the 1 beat, and that's called a pinch. And that's doing the thumb and the second finger at the same time. And I call it a pinch because you're going like that. So now to do the pinch, you may have to hop this finger up just a little as you do it, because it's with this finger planted, it's a little bit of a stretch getting that finger and the thumb going at the same time. So you may see me do a little hop there sometimes when I do that pinch. So that pinch is 2 notes on the 1 beat, and then we have nothing on the and, which is partly because we've just used up the second finger that we would have used on the and to have it go is pretty tricky, and you lose that alternating kind of effect. So we've got a 1 beat to start it off, and then the rest of it is the same. So I'm doing pinch, thumb 1, thumb 2, thumb 1, pinch, thumb 1, thumb 2, thumb 1. Now when you do that thumb 1 at the end and then do the pinch, you kind of hear a cluster of notes. See that? So a lot of times with this discontinuous pattern, you'll leave that last and off, which I've illustrated in the second set here, like we did on the first time. So we've got pinch, thumb 1, thumb 2, thumb 1, pinch, thumb 1, thumb 2, thumb 1. Same things apply. Thumb could be here, or here, or here, or here even, when you do the pinch. You also could do the pinch between the thumb on the 6th string and second finger on the 2nd string. So you've got 2 pinches, any one of the bass notes plus the second finger, and you've got using the fingers moved over one, so the second finger is on the 2nd string. Sorry, I should have said second finger on the 1st string. Second finger now on the 2nd string. So there's several variations there, just as we did with the other one. So we have and that's with me leaving off that last and. If I do the last and, it can be a little busy with that last and in there. And I didn't write this down, but I'm just going to show it to you. Instead of going pinch, thumb 1, you could go thumb, pinch, and pinch these high notes. So like, thumb, pinch, 2nd string, and thumb, pinch, 3rd string, and 1st string. In fact, if you just did that over and over again, that's not a bad start for some blues things. Get that solid thumb beat going. So thumb, pinch, thumb 2, thumb 1, thumb, pinch, thumb 2, thumb 1. So that's yet another discontinuous pattern that I didn't write down. And you could leave off the and following. So you could go thumb, pinch, thumb 2, thumb, thumb, pinch, thumb 2, thumb. That's a pretty open pattern. It's got a lot of spaces in it. That's pretty close to the early Bob Dylan recording of Don't Think Twice. So there's a series of patterns. Work on those. If you have any questions, you can always write to me at over here, strumstick.com, info@strumstick.com. You can go to the website, strumstick.com, and under the video tab, you'll find a link to the Teach Your Guitar to Sing page, TYGS, and that will have all the episodes that we've done, and of course the link to the next week's episode. But the videos for the ones we've already done are there, and that's where you can find this video again. You will also find this video if you click the link that you clicked in order to get to it in the first place. That's where the video will live on YouTube. Okay, so now let's move from fingerpicking to take the fingerpicking away and go to the song. I'm going to start this strumming for the people who are uninterested in fingerpicking and have been patiently waiting. So we got, and we're going to take this at a kind of a moderate speed, and it would sound something like. And the intro goes C, G, A minor, F, C, G, C. Now you could do the C again, or you could do the C and then another G as a turnaround. Different people do that different ways, and you might do it different ways as you go through the song. So the turnaround chord would be going back to the G before you come to the verse. So C, G, A minor, F, C, G, C, turn around. Used to sit and wonder what they. Now here I've done C, G, A minor, and then A minor with a G bass, which is almost like doing a C chord, but you move this finger over to the bass, leaving you with technically an A minor seventh. So from A minor to A minor with a G bass, and that's an A minor seventh, but you'll think of it as an E minor with a G bass, so you know it's the bass note you're working for there, instead of just this A minor seventh. So C, G, A minor, bass note, F, if you don't, C, G, and then there you need to turn around there, and then C, G, A minor. Now here we've got a D7th, and a G, and a G7th. Now the D7th I've also written in small letters there, D7, F sharp bass, and open E. Now that means that the F sharp bass is putting your thumb up here, as we've done that before, if you're able to do that, and you may have to mess with your hand position to get that, but that gives you a nice full bass note in the bottom. And if you open up the first string to give you the E note there, you get an interesting harmony chord. It's the second of the chord. You're adding an E to a D rooted chord, but it fits with the melody because it ain't no used to sit and wonder why, babe. It don't matter anyhow. It don't matter anyhow. It don't matter anyhow. And then the G7th. The first G7 most people learn is with the first finger on first fret on the first string, but you can also do, especially if you're doing this G, you could move this finger over to fourth string at the third fret, and if you can see that in there, and I'm just ignoring the first string now. If you were fingering this G, you can put it on like this and then keep the pinky there, and this note here is an F, which is the same as first string first fret, so you're adding the F note to make it a G7th. So there's several G7ths you could use in there. So it's G, D7th, when your star grows at the C7th break of dawn, look out your window and I'll be gone, I'll be gone. And in this case, you're actually singing I'll be gone. You're singing the E against a D7th chord. I'll be gone. So you're making that note with your voice anyway. If you open that first string with the guitar, you've got a little more support for singing that note, which is a kind of a dissonant note, and some people have trouble finding that note because it's not in the chord. I'll be gone. You're the reason I'm traveling on. Don't think twice, it's all right. And I've got the capo up here because you notice that. Don't think twice, it's all right. That note's a little low, and capo where you need to get that note. for your comfort in singing it. Okay, so that's the basic patterns of the song. Now, um, the song. Let's think about the emotional map for the song. What does this song do? If you, and I've not written out all the words, but if you're somewhat familiar with it, it's basically a person is leaving their partner after trying to work it out, trying to work it out, trying to work it out, and not being happy with the result, and a little bit blaming it on the other person, but trying not to blame it on the other person. Okay, now it's hard not to blame someone that you're leaving at least a little, because it's always easier to see somebody else's challenges than your own. But I think that the first person singing the song, in this case Bob Dylan, is trying to take the high road and say, it's don't worry about it. It's not just you, babe. It's me. But he's not really saying it's me, because he's saying that if you don't know by now, it's no use to wonder about it, which is kind of like a backhanded. So so it's a slightly tormented love song, but it really speaks to emotions that everybody's felt at one time or another. And then he's, and then the next verse he's going down this, don't ain't use in turning on your light, babe. And then I'm going down this long lonesome road, and the other verses each has a little nuance to that ongoing message, and it's pretty nice to have a scene change with each of the verses, so that the repetition of the chords, the repetition of the finger picking or the strumming, and the repetition of the rhythm of the words doesn't distract you from listening to the words. A little scene change actually can help you focus on this new set of words, or you help your audience focus on that. So we're going to look at things to do to make it more interesting. Now, if you're finger picking the song, you would do the same. Or maybe the A minor seventh. And you're going to choose your bass notes to work with the feeling you want in the bottom. So going through the basic song, you could use all continuous, or do the pinch, the discontinuous, or the other discontinuous I showed you with the thumb pinch. So that's pretty straightforward, and it's a completely different feeling to the song when you're finger picking. It's a little more thoughtful, but you'll also have to work a little more to get some development in it, because that can relatively continuous backgrounding that the finger picking makes, you don't have all the same things that you're under control that you do when you're strumming. So the first things I'm going to show you will be with strumming, and the most logical thing to do with this is to add some hammering on in the chords. Now you might, as we've looked at before, so if you're going, you could go 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, 2, and 3. So on the C chord, there's a nice note to hammer on. G chord. That fifth string note's handy. A little hard hammering from open to 3 frets, but you can do that too. So now if I'm doing kind of a zone strumming, I'm strumming the low group, not necessarily a full single note, thumb strum, pick strum, but a group in the bottom. Now if you're going to do hammering on with the F, if you're doing the bar chord, the easiest thing to do is to hammer on that 6th string on the first beat. Because you can just kind of hammer on the whole first finger thing. That takes some practice. That's hard enough by itself, and now I'm asking you to hammer on. Too bad, so sad. It's a great trick, so work on it. But if you're not doing the bar F, you're doing the full F, or the early F that you learn first, you could hammer on and And with the full F, where you have the fifth string covered, that note hammers on nicely, and you can kind of hammer on that first and second string. And if you can hammer on these two together on the one beat, that's an option too. So let's do this one. Now the problem with F is always that if you're zone strumming, that low E is really dissonant with the rest of the chords. So you have to either like muffle that with the side of your hand, or don't hit it, or do the bar. Now as a hammer on, it's never really ringing against the rest of the chords, so it still works. So there's a couple options on the F. When the rooster crows, let's see where we get to. Know by now. And you can mix up whether you're hammering on the one beat or on the two beat. So one hammer on, one hammer on, or one nothing. One nothing, or one hammer, 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 hammer. So again, you've got two places to hammer on, the one beat and the two beat. Hammer on either or both, you know. You can see all those possible variations in where you can hammer on, which gives you, again, a lot of leeway in terms of changing the texture and changing the implied melody that those little hammer-ons make. So now, should you do all those in the first verse, or should you do them all in the second verse? Experiment with that. We've been working with this idea of emotional map and using texture changes and adding little elements just to make the scene change for a while now. So take and start to figure some things out yourself. And the bottom line is it actually doesn't really matter which thing you do when. What matters is that if you are changing what you're doing, as you move from doing one kind of thing to another, there will be an emotional effect as a result of that change. Now, that might work in favor of the feeling you're trying to make with a song, or it might work against it. That's up to you to decide. If you can't tell the difference, there is no difference. But if you feel like, oh, I like it getting a little busier when I come to the second half of this first verse. So like, ain't no use sitting I got a little busier in that second time through that same little melody and almost the same chords. So it's up to you how busy you get when, and you always have the option of not doing as many up strums. And the kind of things we've done before, working with your accenting in the bottom, but those hammering ons are the first layer. Now with finger picking, the hammering on would work the same way, but I would say this, don't even think about hammering on with finger picking until you've got these patterns kind of automatic. So you can just go like this with the C chord. Oh yeah, I can do that all day now. Okay, that's great. And now I'm going to move that thumb to the fourth string every other section of the pattern. So it's thumb on the sixth string, thumb 2, thumb 1, and then thumb on the thumb on the fifth string, and then second finger for thumb finger, and then thumb on the fourth string, second finger, thumb finger. that's that alternating bass thing. So you got to be able to do that before you can do the hammer-on, and then you can do the hammer-on. So slowly, that's thumb, 2, thumb on the 4th string, hammer on, and then thumb. You can leave out the finger that would play where the hammer-on note is, because the hammer-on is making the and. So instead of going thumb and, you're going to go thumb and thumb hammer, thumb and thumb hammer. So it's still 1 and 2 and. Now if you miss, you do the hammer-on on that 4th string, and you happen to hit the 3rd string instead, you'll still get some little pulse there from the hammer-on, so don't worry about that terribly. So with hammering on, and I'm manipulating which string I hit with my thumb to get a convenient hammer-on. So now I'm starting to distort the pattern. I'm not changing the rhythm, but I'm changing the pattern that I just taught you to get the thumb to the string I want to hammer on. 2 ons in a row. Now, that's as much explanation as I'm going to say with that, but here's what the sound of that would be. Now, if you wrote that all out, what I just played, you would not have thumb 2, thumb 1, thumb 2, thumb 1, thumb 2, thumb 1, thumb 2, thumb 1. There are places where I left fingers out because I was doing the hammer-on. There are places where I left the finger out at the end of the 4-beat pattern so that I had a little more room to get ready for the next chord. And that's why I'm saying, so learn those 4 or 5 separate little pattern things that I gave you there, because you'll use them all at various times. Okay, now if you're going to do the discontinuous pattern, the one that starts with a pinch, you can hammer on with the first whatever finger that, whatever the first notes are. So if I'm doing the pinch on the C chord, thumbs on the 6th string and second fingers on the 2nd string. And again, you're going to practice that by itself. As soon as you have anything else going on, feel free to leave off that last and after the 4. Because it gives a little more space for that hammer-on to be heard, you know, standing by itself instead of on top of the ringing out of that last and finger. So C chord. On the G chord, it's really hard to hammer on 1st string all the way to 3rd fret with your pinky or with your 3rd finger. But it's not too hard to hammer on. It's not as hard to hammer on the 6th string. So if you go the discontinuous pattern and then back to the 2nd string to hammer on that 1st finger note on the A minor chord. And if you chose to do the G and the bass, you might go in the 2nd half of the pattern. So you'd start the pattern on the 5th string. Now, you don't so much think of these while you're memorizing the patterns and getting the patterns down. What happens is after you have the patterns down, you hit a spot where you want to hit, you want it to go doom, boom, boom, and you think, well, how do I, what has to play when? Well, let's see, thumb, well, I'm going to start on that A note with the A minor chord. That makes a lot of sense. What now I need, right now, I need that 6th string note over there, so I'll just go thumb over there, and then do whatever the heck you have to do with the rest of it to keep the pattern going. And if you break it down, it turns out to be, oh, that's pretty simple. 5th string, 6th string. And the other fingers are taking care of themselves because you've got that in pattern mode. And then you could hammer on, just like we did with the strumming. So the first, direction of change with the finger picking is adding the hammering on. Another thing that's great to do with the finger picking is just open up a string anytime. Leave it open and see what the heck happens. Now when you do that with strumming, like the C chord, you hear the effect of that open string as a blend with the rest of the chord, and in this case it makes a C major 7th, which is a pleasant chord, but you're hearing a strong chord variation there. So if I went, ain't no use to sit down, it just doesn't, ain't no use to. But if I do that while finger picking, ain't no use to sit down, it's just one little note popping in there. Picking up the 2nd finger, nice variation. And again, with the finger picking, that's not quite as chordally disruptive. Now if you pick up that 4th string note with the 2nd finger there, but you don't hit the 4th string, you're not going to hear any difference when you're finger picking. So you have to direct your thumb to hit that string when you pick it up. And a good exercise, once you've got some finger picking patterns down, is go like this. Just position yourself with your 2nd finger over the 1st string and your thumb on the 6th string, and just go 5th string, 6th string, 5th string, 6th string, 5th string, 6th string, 5th string, 6th string, 4th string, 6th string, 4th string, 6 3 6 3 6 3 6 4 6 4 6 4 6 5 6 5 6 5 6 5. So you're getting used to saying, oh, thumb, you go here, 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 wherever I need you. Your thumb is your utility infielder here. You could also do alternating basses. And then do those various combinations with the other fingers in. Now, could I start a finger picking pattern on a G chord by starting on the 4th string? Yes, you can. If you're playing a D chord, you'll often start on the 4th string. So like I said, the thumb covers 6, 5, 4, and 3. Okay. By the way, if you've moved your 1st and 2nd finger from the outside strings over one string, the thumb no longer has to cover the 3rd string. You now can cover 6, 5, and 4, because otherwise it's going into the zone where the 1st finger is working. Okay, so there we go. Now we have basic finger picking. We have a little ornament with the hammering on. We have the strumming the song, and we have hammering on and things like that, and strumming the song. Now, as we go through from verse to verse, I'm going to play through the equivalent of each verse. I'm going to do it a little fast so we can get through each verse and show you a series of optional, settings for each of the verses. You should not necessarily do the ones that I do, but I want you to see the difference in the feeling, and you'll see some of the things I'm doing, and I'll say some of them. So I'll say some of the words to kind of give you an idea which verse I'm in, depending on whether I remember all 5 verses of the song or not. But so we've got, it starts with a. Now I think if you're going to strum this song, keep it quiet, keep it slow, keep it light at the beginning. Like that. So the opening. two ways to keep it light. One is by volume, but the other is by not doing as many upstrums. So, and that low, high, low, high, low, high, low, high gives the song just the right amount of sort of country feeling that it is. It's a it's a folk song in a country vein. Not full on country and western, but it's definitely, it is not an urban song. Not with a rooster in it, right? Now you can force that repetitive kind of boom chugga 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 boom chugga boom chugga boom chugga boom chugga, and just keep that as a almost like a Woody Guthrie kind of approach to the song, and just do that all the way through the whole song, and that becomes like the Greek chorus staying the same, and then the words are the only thing that's different. But I think if you keep that light and then build on it, so here's the intro. And I'll do the turnaround. And now when I start singing, ain't no use to sit and wonder why I'm doing even a little bit less and a little quieter. If you don't know by now, then it ain't no use to sit and wonder why they didn't matter anyhow. Now I did that A minor and the A minor 7th there, even though I didn't write it down. Ain't no use to sit and wonder why they don't. You don't really need a lot of development in this whole first verse if you're keeping it light. A rooster crows at the break of dawn. Look out your window. Now you might want to pick up the urgency just a little as you come into here. When your rooster crows at the break of dawn. We're not doing the same chords as in the earlier part. It's a different chord pattern. And so the repetition of the rhythm starts to become apparent as you kind of go into this third section. So you start it with the rhythm. Now make a little variation on the F. Look out your window and I'll be gone. Just a couple of extra upstrums. So whereas going 1, 2, and 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, and 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, 2, and 3, and 4, 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4. And you don't have to make it loud. And moving where you're strumming. Drop back by the bridge for that D7th. That's an open sounding chord, and the brightness back here makes that extra note that you're throwing in there stand out. Or contrarily, rooster crows at the break of dawn. Moving back there really makes that little section of chords stand out on both the F and the D7th. And the third inversion would be rooster crows at the break of dawn. Look out your window and I'll be gone. I pushed up towards where the neck meets the body, which really booms the bass of that F. Now I think that's a little strong on the F, but it might be great when you move from the F to the D7th. Rooster crows at the break of dawn. Now, so there's that boom chukka bucka, boom chukka bucka bucka, boom chukka bucka bucka kind of rhythm. You could accentuate that a little with a little little cutting off with a chord. Now I'm completely exaggerating that to to demonstrate it. I don't think that works with this song. Ain't no use to sit and wonder why. Okay, but a little hint of that. So just a little pulse cutoff becomes a very subtle accent. So you could work that in at any point in the verses. So we move from the first verse to the second verse. And the second verse is, ain't no use in turning on your light, babe. Now, turning on your light, babe, of course, is a metaphor for ain't no use in finally, opening your heart to me. But he's also saying it's your car light, like she's going out looking for him. Ain't no use in trying to follow me. I'm on the dark side of the road. Wonderful collection of mixed metaphors and reality in there. But if you think he's indicating that it's dark, because he's when your rooster crows at the break of dawn, ain't use in turning on your light. It's twilight morning. It's dawn and dark. So get it a little darker there. Maybe move up into move the whole thing up into here where it's a little darker toned, and work it a little more in the bass and make it maybe even quieter. What? Getting lower after you've started the song? Shocking, but that's very effective sometimes. Traveling on, don't think twice, it's all right. Ain't no use in turning on your light, babe. That light I never know. All I did is I moved up a little here and I got even quieter. So that's one subtle way of changing that. So don't think, so the end of the first verse. You're the reason I'm traveling on. Don't think twice, it's alright. Ain't no use in turning on your light, babe. That light I never know. If you want to hush it a little more, do that flying chop. Ain't no use in turning on your light, babe, where you're hitting with the edge of your hand, karate chop on the strings, even as the pick strikes the bottom couple strings. Ain't no use in turning on your light, babe. Now, yes, the notes are going to be a little indistinct. Sometimes you'll over muffle, sometimes you'll under muffle. Don't worry about it. It's a texture change we're worrying about, not the exact specific sound. And listen to the difference. Again, I'll come from the end of the first verse. And remember, we're a little busy. We're going a little busier at the end of the second verse. We added a few more upstrums in this particular approach to it. You're the reason I'm traveling on. Don't think, that's like a railroad train rhythm. Don't think twice, it's all right. Ain't no use to sit, ain't no use in turning on your light, babe. Now, if you're going to do that chop, you can't go up and do it here, because it goes. That little chop only works just in front of the bridge. Ain't no use in turning on your light, babe. That light I never know. Ain't no use in turning on your light, babe. I'm on the dark side of the road. Okay, so that changes the mood in that verse. It darkens it down. It changes the lighting. To me, that feels dark. Now, do you want to do that all the way through? Maybe, maybe not all the way through that verse. You could still build again by adding some upstrums. You might add a little bit of hammering on. Turning on your light, babe. Don't bother with the hammer on in this little first bit, because you've introduced a new element. Let people get used to it. Let it stand on its own for a little bit. And then when it starts to settle in, vary things. Turning on your light, babe. That light I never know. And repeating once, always good idea. Ain't no use. And oh yeah, this is familiar. I know we heard that before. Turn your light, babe, on the dark side of the road. So, and now's the time to bring in another element. So that whole the second verse, ain't no use in turning on your light, babe. That light ain't never knows. And it ain't no use in turning on your light, babe. I'm on the dark side of the road. Still, if there was something you could do or say. Now I'm going back to what I did in the first verse for that little. Wish there was something you could do or say to try and make me change my mind and stay. And open it up here. We never did too much talking anyway. That think twice, it's alright. So what we just did there was from the first verse, we did a little development within the first verse. We developed from the first verse to the second verse and took it down. Later in the second verse, we added the little hammering on to start to open it up a little bit again. And then in the last part of the second verse, we went right back to the way we started the song and got busier and maybe even a little louder, because this is like a climactic moment within the song. Now, is this the peak moment of the whole song? No. But you're the reason I'm traveling on. Don't think twice, it's all right. Okay, so you don't want to spend it all. You can't do your finale crescendo there, but that's a place to, it just feels right to do that. If you're letting the words and the emotion of the words carry you along. Now, you might come up with a different interpretation. You might find that that's the place to come completely back and really let that stand out by being quiet. That's legitimate too. Let's say, I'm on the dark side of the road, so I wish there was something you could do or say to try and make me change my mind and stay. We never did too much talking anyway. Don't think twice, it's all right. So you can make it really thoughtful and reflective in there too. So these are the kind of choices you have. Where are we? We're almost done here. Let's run right through the rest of the song and just show a number of variations in here. And thank you again for coming to Teach Your Guitar to Sing. And I will certainly be here next week, next Wednesday night. And thank you very much to the Folk Project with the Acoustic Stay Away, who is hosting this series. And I'm a longtime member and a founder of the Folk Project, and I'm really glad to help the Folk Project out by doing this. And it's keeping us all active and keeping us off the streets, as they say. So I'm going to take it from the second verse. Ain't no use in turning on your light, babe. That light I never know. And it ain't no use in turning on your light, babe. I'm on the dark side of the road. Still I wish there was something you could do or say to try and make me change my mind and stay. We never did too much talking anyway. Don't think twice, it's all right. Maybe a little instrumental turn. Just the intro there. Ain't no use in calling out my name, gal. Now here I'm going to almost single notes. Ain't no use in calling out my name, gal. You never done before. Whatever the words are there. Ain't no use in calling out my name, gal. I can't hear you anymore. So there was something that I very syncopated accenting in there. Might fit, might not fit. Depends on which verse you do it in. That might be too much like the lounge version of the song, but you could subtly indicate that. I think we're pretty much like the first verse, but maybe even quieter. If you want to dress it up more, you can start doing some little added notes, extra fingers in the chords. So that would be, what's the line? I'm going down that lonesome road, where I'm bound, I can't tell. So I'll just say very well. Don't think you're the only one, but as I'm walking down this road, I once loved a child, I'm told. And now leave some spaces. I once loved a road and a child, I'm told. I'd give her my heart, but she wanted my soul. Now he's definitely blaming her. You know, in this case, it's a male singing it to a woman, and he's making her wrong, making himself the victim and all that. But this is what we do in songs that have a blues component. We moan and we complain, and we feel a little better at the end of it, and we might even feel superior because we wouldn't say that about the person that we once loved. But, it's like I say, this borrows from the blues. It's getting down and dirty and gritty, and they're telling it like the guy's feeling. And right now he feels like it was her fault. He did his best, and she just wouldn't listen to him. You know, we've heard that so many times. It should be flipped around. The girl should be singing the song most of the time, historically. However, we won't go there. Sing this from either perspective or neither, but it is truly about a person who is leaving a relationship, is frustrated, and has tried the best that they could. And I hope that in a later song, he learns a little more about himself and discovers what his own responsibilities in the matter were. And if we look through Bob Dylan's catalog, maybe we'll find that song there. Now another little instrumental thing, you could play the whole verse as an instrumental if you can work a little melody bits and hammering on in, or you could just do the intro. Of a little single note run there. It doesn't even matter exactly which notes you play. I'm doing that run for the rhythmic effect of it. You know, I could go and get almost the same effect. So. Little blues bend note in there. This hurts the blank out of your pinky, bending that, but it sounds so good there. So if you can do that. step with the intro. And slow it down. And I'm going to do just a little bit of some of that with the finger-picking dress-ups. And you could keep that finger picking at the very subtle very spare. Something like that at the end. And so there's a bunch of different variations on finger picking and strumming and Don't Think Twice. And hope you have a great week and everybody be safe and be well.